I'm spoiled for choice in this monologue, and I'll leave the most important issue right to the end. But let me have some fun first, why don't you? The head of Britain's Royal Navy, you know, the Navy that has hardly any ships, that Gilbert and Sullivan Navy. Well, its head, I've got to choose my words carefully here. Its Rear Admiral, no, its Head Admiral has just been peremptorily dismissed from the service for an illicit extramarital affair with a married officer who was his subordinate. It is conduct unbecoming. Don't tell me the Royal Navy doesn't any longer have standards. So, as I said earlier, we've got more admirals than we have warships. We've got 13 of those. We've got 2 aircraft carriers, but one of them had to limp into port glued together and is non-functional. And in any case, aircraft carriers are so very last century, floating coffins. That's why there's none of them in the Straits of Hormuz or in the Red Sea. The dismissal of Britain's chief naval officer compounds the military's problem of mass desertion. Not without leave, but people leaving the service and not being seduced by the ever more weird and wonderful recruitment ads that appear in the most unlikely places. The British Army sponsored the under-21 football tournament, I noticed to my amusement just the other day. Well, the British Armed Forces are famously shrunken and, quite woke, actually, but they are itching to fight the Russians. Little John Healey, the inky-fingered clerk who, believe it or not, is your war minister, my fellow British citizens, was promising today to Parliament to ramp up 10 times the number of drones that he's giving to Ukraine. Well, we've got lots of money, you see, and lots of spare military capacity. We've got so much money that we just kicked 150,000 more British citizens into poverty. Official, their own statistics. That's the cost of the attacks on the disabled and the dreadfully poor in the new welfare reform. Isn't it funny how reform is always a bad thing nowadays? At the time of the suffragettes, reform was a positive thing for which people were prepared to throw themselves in front of the king's horse in the Derby, were prepared to chain themselves to railings, were prepared to deface portraits in public galleries, were prepared to disrupt the proceedings of the House of Commons. It was such a success getting women the vote that today, in 2025, a whole number of women MPs were decked out in the suffragettes' colours, some even wearing the sash of the suffragettes, others merely the rosette. That was just before they all proscribed, against the calls of the United Nations itself, the Palestine Action Organization, a direct action organization in direct line of succession to the aforementioned suffragettes, though they have not been prepared to commit suicide by throwing themselves in front of the king's horse in the Derby, unlike the suffragettes, the same women, hypocrite MPs that were hailing the civil disobedience campaign of the suffragettes, then banned the Palestine Action Group. Now, I've got to tell you, I've got to put my cards on the table. I'm not myself much of a fan of individual acts of direct action. When there's 1 million people going to take an act of direct action, call me. I'll be in for that, because that's a revolution rather than an individual act. But who in their right mind would not have sympathy with someone who breaks into a Royal Air Force base and throws red paint on the fighter jets they're in? Red paint symbolizing the blood which those fighter jets have been eliciting from Palestinian children for more than 20 months. Steadily, every night, They're up there assisting the so-called IDF. I promise my editor, I won't. The red paint can be washed off. The blood shed by the children in Gaza can never be washed away, least of all from the hands of those who shed it. Now, Palestine Action spend almost all of their time taking direct action against a genocide. I've got to tell you and tell the British government, and I hope the courts where this action will now move, that it is a legal obligation on all citizens to do everything that they can to interdict acts of genocide. And Palestine Action have the words of the world's highest court, the International Court of Justice, ringing in their ears. They are the only ones acting lawfully in this picture. It's the British government and its agents who are acting in a criminal way. If there was any justice, it would be them that were being proscribed. It would be them facing court, facing prison. But of course, justice there is little of in this country and still less in many others. Palestine Action were banned with only 26 people voting against. Earlier, the Parliament had kicked the crutches and the wheelchairs away from people on the benefit given, very small benefit given, to permanently disabled, injured people in this country. Because, of course, we have to pay for the 10 times ramped up supply of drones to little Zelensky, don't we? Zelig is still on the rounds, picking everybody's pocket, including British pensioners, including British disabled people. You've got to say, it's a wonder that all the Labour MPs were not weeping in shame and embarrassment today. But the only one who was weeping was not weeping for the Palestinian children in Gaza. Neither was she weeping for the disabled people whose wheelchair she'd just turned over. Neither were they weeping for the poor pensioners struggling to get by. They were not weeping for anybody suffering in the world except themselves, or herself, as it turns out. Rachel Reeves, a desiccated calculating machine who substantially forged her curriculum vitae, who said she worked in a bank but didn't say it was in customer services, taking people's complaints about the dust on the counter in the local savings bank. She told everyone she was an economist at the Bank of England, except an economist was definitely not even close to what she was. She told everybody, even more remarkably, that she was Labour, that she was a Labour candidate in her Leeds constituency, but she turned out to be Mrs. Thatcher without the laughs. Rachel Reeves is her name. Remember it. I know she's easily forgettable, but she's the next one to be sacked in the British Labour cabinet. The reason I know that is that the Prime Minister was forced by the opposition, who for once did their job today, into offering her support for the wonderful job that she's doing, wrecking the British economy. And he did, but only as the rope supports the hanging man. Whereupon, right behind him, in shot, in the same camera lens, she burst into tears. Now, don't think me misogynist in any way, but it's not a good look for the markets, for the pound, for the stock markets, for the stability of the country to see the second person in the state sobbing in public on the front bench in Parliament. That is a bad look, Rachel. Especially as you've been trying to demonstrate that, like Mrs. Thatcher, you pee standing up. especially if you've been trying to demonstrate that you are as hard as nails. But when the Prime Minister didn't promise to keep you as Chancellor of the Exchequer, you literally had tears rolling down your cheeks. And then I saw this little Britain figure, you know, that yeah but no but, yeah but no but, you know her? Except it was Lisa Nandy, once actually a very attractive young woman, but now looking like a character out of Little Britain. Then I saw the Prime Minister himself fall down the steps of 10 Downing Street, steps that he's negotiated 1,000 times in the last 12 months. But funnily enough, in front of all the television cameras, tripped and fell on his way out of Downing Street. I say that all of this is some kind of sign. The sign that a government is rattling down. I've lived through the rise and fall of many governments. I sat in Parliament through the rise and fall of many governments. I saw Mrs. Thatcher in her pomp, and I saw her weeping in the back of a taxi as she shuttled out of Downing Street, defenestrated. I've seen Tony Blair, puffed out chest and braggadocio. I saw him slink out of Parliament, making way for his nemesis, Gordon Brown. I saw Gordon Brown's glass eye crying in 10 Downing Street, as he too, by the electorate this time, was defenestrated in 2010. So I know what I'm looking for. I saw David Cameron, having blown it with the Brexit referendum, having to slink away. I saw Boris Johnson bounce, but not quite like Tigger, out of Downing Street for the last time. I saw Theresa May. She was weeping too, but at least she'd just lost her job as Prime Minister. I've seen them all come and go. And so, believe me when I tell you that this Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, will not be there by Christmas. Whoever else is switching on the Christmas TV lights, it will not be the accident-prone, clunking robot Keir Starmer. Because I saw a fellow looking very sleek on the benches just along from him. His name was Wes Streeting. He's the health secretary. He's Israel's #1 guy. And they're getting ready to replace the hapless Keir with the lean and hungry. Just actually recently lean. He must have been on one of those Ozempic jabs that he was going to stab the populace with just before the reports came out about the pancreatitis that they often cause. Wes Streeting has slimmed down. He has that lean and hungry look. It won't be the Ides of March. It'll be Christmas. Mark my words. Now Netanyahu, the killer, he got a visa. Unlike Bob Villan, who got his visa withdrawn for chanting about death on the stage at Glastonbury, a man who's actually delivered death to hundreds of thousands of people in the last 20 months, most of them women and children, an increasing number of them small children, babies even yet unborn. He's welcome. Not just in America, he's welcome in Washington. He's welcome in the White House. In fact, Trump said in one of these ridiculously numerous off-the-cuff comments that he keeps making that when Netanyahu arrived, the two of them were going to have a little celebration. What they were going to celebrate, at first I thought it was the joint attack on Iran or the celebration of the mass murder of hundreds of thousands of people in Gaza. But no, it's now clear that what they are celebrating is the absolutely imminent second American attack on Iran. Iran just closed its airspace. Sources close to the American Department of Defense say that a second wave of US bomb attacks on Iran are imminent. Imminent. Could be now. Might be while we're on the air. Quite likely before we go to sleep tonight. So when they talk of ceasefires, when they talk of the resumption of negotiations, I'm reminded of Oscar Wilde's brilliant quip, the more they talked of their honor, the faster we counted the spoons. They are thieves, they are liars, they are killers, and when they come to you proffering a 60 days ceasefire, well, beware of the Greeks bearing gifts. That's all I have to say, because my next guest, first guest, Minar Adley, the founder and director of Mint Press News, is going to have very much more to say, and I want to leave time for her to say it. It's the mother of all talk shows.